Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 99, one for each balloon. We're recording live on June 13th, 2017. Let me, as us, give love to Stephen Hines and say you should check out his Zombie Fabulous series and donate to the Kickstarter to get number 3 completed. There are too many unanswered questions from 1 and 2, like will Leia choose Luke, Han, or that Chewie fella? When I announce the demise of this show, let's be honest, I'm going to be passive-aggressive, and I'll leave your asses hanging. So I hope to do it like my current guest. But was his soul saved? I had Sai Lost on for episode 39 to talk about his new show, the Save My Soul podcast. Well, there's a massive graveyard of podcasts, and some of my former guests have dug a few. I've never had a chance to do an exit interview for the former podcasters, so that's what we'll do with Sai tonight. How's it going? How's the soul? And how are the beverages?
The beverage is a Soulless by Rivertown. That should give you a hint. But I can't say that my podcast is in a graveyard because that implies a body, right? I scorched and burned that shit. It is gone. It is gone from existence. But yeah, the podcast did die. And after 60 episodes of the Zachrilege Cast, I'm afraid I did not get my soul saved.
See, there's this cliffhanger, Now you don't have to worry about it and listen to all the episodes, right?
That's right. The episodes that are no longer there, yeah.
Now tonight, usually when I start the show, I do some out-of-context quotes for my guest. But we're going to honor the guy whose show has gone away by doing an out-of-context quote before every question. But I will say that quantities may run out before out of questions. We're going to do that. So we're going to do the quote followed by the question, which sometimes isn't a question, which I hear really helps you when you're in sports broadcasting. We have the sweet smell of pig shit on every highway. So introduce yourself and get people caught up on where we are today.
I used to have a fake pseudonym called Sai Lost. I did 25 episodes of the Save My Soul podcast and shut it down. And I have officially killed off Sai Lost for all intents and purposes. I think it's a shame you don't have more exit interviews, though. I remember finding a bunch of good podcasts from your show, and I have seen a few of them hit the wayside. And you always wonder what happened. Did they work things out? Did they die? And sometimes you don't know these things. I feel like you owe it to the fans out there to at least justify yourself, right?
Well, it's good to catch up. You start a show and you're like, I'm not re-interviewing anybody. And then you're like, yeah, but people change over time. They stop doing a podcast, or they do a new podcast, or they do a new podcast every week if you're the Scathing Atheist crew. These things happen. I forget if I mentioned that I'm drinking a beer from Prairie. This is out of Oklahoma. Little Oklahoma does some good beer. South Andrews, get on it. Paradise. Imperial Stout brewed with coconut and vanilla. And it's very strong on the vanilla flavor, 13%. You're supposed to let a stout sit. It's a little tough to do. But I want to drink the beer. It's open.
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to do, and note that I'm the snooty podcaster who says we when there's one person here. Multiple personalities, sure, but only one person.
Royal, yeah.
We're going to do a version of the podcast questionnaire, which I probably haven't really done lately. But we're going to do an emphasis on the past tense.
Sure.
So like I said, quote, then question. 12-year-olds can't make fun of my genitals when I die. Where are you currently located?
So I'm supposed to respond with a quote. Is that how this works?
No, you're not. You can answer the question. If you have more quotes, I'm impressed. You seem pretty good on your feet, even though you're technically sitting down. But go ahead.
I am currently located at work. Are we speaking geographic region?
Yeah.
I'm in the godforsaken state of Indiana, and I mean that quite literally. God has forsaken us. It is winter, 9 months of the year. I'm enjoying the 1 week of really solid summer right now, and am lamenting the coming winter in mid June probably. Yeah.
I don't know, the whole climate change thing. Like you guys might be safe. So is it
Well, you
better?
understand now why nobody believes in global warming. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Obviously, when you look out the window, there's no global warming, Zach. That's absurd.
Now, do you think the state's better or worse off with Pence out the door?
I feel like, I feel like Mike Pence is. He was the insect on top of the anthill. You know what I mean? You take him off the anthill, you still have a problem. I mean, the people that put him there are the problem, and the bills that are getting passed are the problem. And if it was like Mike Pence was some crazy dictator that somehow came to power in Indiana, and oh yeah, we got rid of him, and now we're free to be the wonderful, reasonable people that we are, then that would be one thing. But it's not really how it works here. I mean, the people here very well, they have views that bother me greatly. I would call quite regressive when it comes to social issues.
Yeah, I heard the new governor is just kind of a boilerplate version of him, but maybe not. Well, I'd say the personality. I don't really know if Pence has a personality. He's kind of like created one. Like
if you look at some of the
Jesus.
things, some of the things our state legislature has done, actually since Pence left, some of the stuff that they've done, it's just been horrible and horrifying. And you're like, yeah, let's find ways to make it easier for companies to loosen their standards on pollution. And I love living close to the steel mills in Gary, and I love breathing that in. Let's let them do more of that. Let's make my neighborhood smell more like manure from the nearby pig farms. It's just one of those things where it's like, and I've said this before on some of the podcasts that I've done, is that I don't know how long we can pretend that we have to love our small businesses here for the sake of the at the detriment of the environment. I don't know how long you can pretend that those things, you can just piss away your resources in your air and make a little extra cash. And I feel like that's all we're doing. And the policies that are coming out kind of just push us really far in that direction, in my opinion.
That is kind of the era that we're in, but I've already gotten off track. It's easy to get off track when you're drinking a 13% beer. And what the heck, So we'll get to the next one. That's not a Christian because I don't agree with them. So how did you get started with your podcast? What made you kind of push you over the edge and say, I can do this. This is easy. Maybe not the easy part.
So the birth of Sai Lost, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So there was the podcasting in general came from a desire to find a new way to be fun with my friends. I had two good buddies that we would play a lot of video games, but we realized we were getting too old to be competitive at shooters. Suddenly we were getting crushed by kids who were making fun of our mothers. So one of the things that we did to have a little bit more fun was we did our own podcasting with craft beer and such. But the reason Sai Lost came to be was because I was also trying to find Yahweh in particular. And it didn't have to be Yahweh, but he was the guy that was nearby. He was next door, so why not, right? And the cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing being in an environment where everyone around me absorbed this stuff, and it was so foreign to things I could accept. It wasn't like I had a list of 10 problems, and if you correct them, then I'm good. It was more like, what would it take to believe in this stuff? I don't know. Start over. let's try again from the top. There was so much incontinuity between the way the world is that I see it and the way the world would need to be for there to be the Christian God in particular. And because I was trying so hard to accept this stuff, I essentially was having to play nice during the day and not be an asshole to all these people around me and start fights with, friends and family and church members. So I started writing these nasty, scathing, I shouldn't use that word because that's probably copyrighted by now, but these nasty, horrible atheistic essays that were very, very sarcastic and very bitter and very angry. And it was my way to vent. And the other podcasts, I already had some of the equipment and I already had the know-how, and I thought it would be fun to put it out there. And a lot of the shows that I've heard over the years meant a lot to me as I was going through that journey. And I don't know, it seemed like something that would be fun to put out and see if I could add to the noise, I guess.
So when did you learn that it wasn't really fun?
Oh, great question. It is fun. It to be honest, the one thing about the Save My Soul podcast that never went away was the fun. The stress from life made sometimes any hobby a burden, especially if you put yourself on a timeline. And that was honestly my mistake. I said, you know what? Every 2 weeks, I'm going to do one of these guys. And that was self-inflicted because there would be days where I just didn't have anything of significance to say and I was totally phoning it in. And that's, if you're trying to create something, that's not a good way. That's not a productive way to do it. No, I should say it never stopped being fun. It did sometimes conflict with life, which any podcaster, I'm sure you are aware of that, how much it can conflict with life. When you have jackasses on Central Time that make you stay up, to 9 p.m. Eastern and
on a work night. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Matlock isn't even on at this point.
Yeah, if Matlock's not on, I'm going to bed. That's how I say. That's what I say.
Okay, now that we escaped again with another off-the-cuff question. See, that's the plan. It's just going so well tonight. Time for another quote, then another question. Why did the fucking often. Yes? Why did the fucking Mexicans ruin my shingles? So, how did the show change during the run?
Wait, I thought I was going to answer the shingles question first. Isn't it? Okay, no. The show started out as I had a handful of essays already written out, and each one had basically a one-word title. I don't actually remember what they were anymore, but they tended to tackle the main tenets that people struggle with if they're losing their faith. Things like faith or heaven or Jesus, for instance. These were all my one-word titles at the time. And after a while, I started branching away and to start tackling a little bit more complicated ideas, like I did at the very end, I did a 3-part segment. I think it was 3 parts on Answers in Genesis, where I actually went through that website, which is brutal, by the way. That is a new form of torture, making yourself spend hours on Answers in Genesis. That'll really put the nail in the coffin. And I did a little bit on a website called Science Against Evolution. So it kind of evolved into a show that was essentially attacking bad ideas, and the central themes seemed to be religion. I mean, if you take away the religion, there's nobody to make the Science Against Evolution.info website because it's all bunk, and nobody who's not motivated to do so by religion would. So, yeah, the anger definitely left the show because the first 3 or 4 was really where I was all fired up about why am I not getting this thing that everybody else can get so easily? What is wrong with me? Why am I a broken person? Essentially.
Looks like you never answered that one.
I did. I do know. And honestly, you and I talked about this little exit interview about a year ago. Well, 6 or 7 months ago. And at the time I didn't know the answer. And I'm one of those people that although I like to think of myself reasonable, when I get emotional about something, whether it's anger or sadness, that all goes out the window. I become apish. I become truly animal. And I lose the ability to really reflect upon what's going on. And it probably took me the better part of that 8 or 9 months off and on to figure out exactly why I was feeling the way I was feeling about the podcast, why I shut it down, and why I erased him from the internet. Because it wasn't an obvious thing for me. It was definitely, when I did that, it was definitely an emotional response, and it took me a long time to really piece together why and what it meant.
What did it mean?
Well, it meant that there are lots of ways to represent yourself. There are lots of different spins you can put on the same ideas. And I decided that the way I was representing myself was coming from a place of anger. It was unauthentic. It was false in the sense that I was angrier on my show and I was more tolerant towards bad ideas in my real life. And both of those were phony. I don't know if you're a fan of the Hitchhiker's Guide books or movie. Are you a fan of those?
I've read them, yeah.
Well, the movie in particular, there's a great scene, visual scene where, the president, I said Zach Brannigan, but that's Futurama. The president, Zaphod Beeblebrox. Man, how did I pull that out? He actually removed part of his brain and put it into a second head. What I was doing, I had carved up my personality into multiple facets, and I had a nice person and a nasty person at night, and neither one of them really represented the real me. And then I looked back on the show as a legacy of how I was or who I was. I don't think it was correct, and I was honestly, to an extent, I was never ashamed with the ideas or even the quality, although I am a little bit now because that was years ago, and I've gotten a much better microphone. But I am ashamed of the way I said certain things, and I burned them because I didn't want that to be the only way that I ever said those ideas that people would remember.
Well, I can kind of empathize with that because I do believe that sometimes the persona I put on this show is different than me. At least maybe the version of me, because I have that Zachrilege Twitter account. That's definitely the angrier side. Sure. I'm just going to shoot something off real quick. That would be really dumb if someone became president who did that. But, just that quick kind of from the hip, maybe not well thought out version of me.
Sure.
But then I also think if I wanted to do a perfect podcast, I would never produce a podcast. And I say what you did was good stuff. And not just because of the audio stuff and the voices and the actual editing work. Whoa, look at you. See, if you recorded live, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to talk to you way back. Sai Lost is apparently lost, unfortunately. Now, I think we already answered the question, but I have to use this quote. So you can take a good shit and listen to episodes 2 and 3. So why do you taunt us with episodes on iTunes that aren't there anymore? Today, I am a professional, people. I was, of course, the day of the show going, hey, I should listen to some of the later shows because I only listened to, I think, the first few. And then I went to iTunes and it shows the podcast, and then you click on it and you can't download it. So what made you say, you know what? This just... No, unless you wanted to get an episode directly from me, and you should probably charge for that, forget it. You can't visit this version of me.
Well, I do want to say that I think the one thing that really, really, really killed Sai Lost was the Atheist Experience, the show. And it's because I love that show, and I was listening to that show a lot. And number one, when I was hitting the end of episode 25, I was taking a little breather. I don't know if I was a guitar player in college. I don't know if you had an instrument like that you played for fun, but I played guitar, and every now and then I would get drunk and I'd be playing some chords and I'd say, this sounds great. This is I'm going to make a song out of this. And then I'd go show my buddies, my roommates, hey, listen to this. And my roommate would say, Chili Peppers. I'd be like, damn it, every time. That was kind of what was happening with my atheistic ideas. I was starting from a layperson's perspective. I didn't debate. I didn't know what these things were called. I had taken a lot of philosophy courses in college, So, I mean, I knew some basic rules about deduction and induction and inference, but I didn't know what an ad hominem attack was. I didn't know what any of that stuff was called. So when I was kind of piecing this stuff together for my show, I was essentially reinventing the wheel over and over again. And then I would hear Matt Dillahunty in about 3 words accomplish something that might have taken me 2 weeks to understand and express. So it's where it was like, okay, there's literally nothing, as a sole person speaking into a microphone, there's literally nothing that I could say about this enterprise of atheism that's new. And so aside from new ideas, I was confronted by a few different friends, people that were close to me in my life, who were really off-put by the way the show sounded. And I think I actually reached out to you at this time and asked you, because I knew that you had listened to some of the shows, because you had to, because you were interviewing me and you're a nice guy. And so I asked, hey man, did I sound like a jackass, basically? And you were kind about it, but there were a few other people I asked the same question to, because I was having trouble understanding why the theistic people in my life were disturbed, not just didn't like it, but were disturbed by the way I was saying those ideas. And I have to accept that goal was to actually have some dialogue with theists, which is what I always said. I was definitely doing something wrong because the people that I was trying to talk to were being put off. And the funny thing was, I really honestly believed that I was saying things in a way that was definitely irreverent of ideas, especially bad ideas, but not necessarily mean against people. And I don't think other people felt that way. So you combine the fact that you're not saying anything new, you're pissing off the people you're wanting to attract, and then the nail in the coffin was Dana. Dana was someone who called into the Atheist Experience, an old woman. I don't know how old. I shouldn't say old, but she's older than me. And talking about how her family had essentially disowned her. This is about 6 months ago. Disowned her for her lack of belief. And sued. She teared up on the show, the Atheist Experience, and it really tugged at my heartstrings. And so I actually reached out to her as Sai Lost and offered her, essentially, if you ever need to talk to somebody, there is a community here that cares. And then I realized, wow, if this woman goes and listens to my show, there's a lot of dick jokes and profanity and borderline not so nice comments in there. So even if I wanted to outreach to people, if I wanted to do a friendlier side, that I was kind of limiting myself to shouting angrily and vulgarly with the persona that I had created. And that was kind of it. That was my emotional response. It was, I don't want to be remembered. I want to be able to reach out to people like Dana. And I don't want her to be put off because of my language. I want to be able to reach out to people like, reach out to theists and have honest conversations and not be put off and not have them put off because my tone is too irreverent. So if I'm going to speak about atheism, I need to do it in a way that is different fundamentally from how I'm doing it. And yeah, that's when I had that emotional response. I slashed and burned everything, and I didn't even figure it out for the 3 or 4 months probably why I was doing it, and probably not a full 8, 9 months until I had a really good understanding of it.
I was thinking like irrelevant and dick jokes. I'm thinking like 600 episodes of Cognitive Dissonance and Scathing Atheist can say that. Yeah, I would say for the believing theist to listen to one of those shows, yeah, that probably wouldn't work for them. But it's more the reaching out. I mean, of course, as someone who's almost triple digits on shows and going, sometimes what am I doing here? But it's still reaching some people, and there aren't that many voices out there. If Noah is correct in his Scathing Atheist diatribe where he said there was something like 80,000 Christians for each non-believer, then there need to be more people talking. So
I agree.
I do agree. You make a good point, but I think you can think of any like TV show, book, any kind of work of fiction, you think, is that really a news story? And the Bible wasn't a news story, but people pretend it is. So, well, it's not one story. We know that. But it's just kind of the way you say it, your unique voice, and whether it's the true you or not. I don't know. It came off as one I enjoyed. And I feel bad doing this, but I do this every show, so it's time for live read number 1. I have a feeling that Sai Lost will not be attending this, but on July 22nd, 2017, come to Chattanooga with me and many of the special friends as we try and revisit the ReasonCon magic. Secular Saturday will feature a keynote speech by Mandisa Thomas, a podcasters gathering including Bobby Nashley of No Religion Required, Tucker Drake, Atheist in the Trailer Park, Chris Watson, Podunk, and Grade A Free Beer Drinker. I just had some beers with him Sunday night watching the poor, sad, doomed Nashville Predators lose. And also Jen of Not Another Atheist Podcast, and much more will be there. So go to secularsaturday.com. So you mentioned
real
that
quick,
you were
real quick.
yeah.
That is a shame. I'm going to be in Asheville that exact weekend, which I know isn't right next door, but it's a heck of a lot closer. I wish that was within driving distance. I would totally come see you guys.
Yeah, Asheville is about an hour or two away from where ReasonCon was, and I desperately wanted to go there just because they have some of the best breweries in the East Coast, but it just didn't work out. I'm like, I just have to make a separate trip.
That's why I'm going. Me and my bros, we're going to go hit every brewery. That's the plan.
That's a lot. I appreciate the, chutzpah involved there.
We're going to give it a shot, yeah.
Let's see. So I'm going to throw this quote out here, although the question's pretty much been answered. Atheists like these theists can fall victim to hyperbole and incorrect wordness. Now, you killed your persona, but you didn't really, it was like a really bad gangster cover-up of a murder, because you can still find the podcast, although you can't listen to the episodes. The blog still is there, although there's nothing there. The Facebook page exists. I was your 8th like, so see, now I feel bad. I'm like, man, if I'd liked your page on Facebook earlier, you'd still be with us, man. It's not right.
Yeah, I'm basically Tupac. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm still around even though I'm dead, for sure.
Oh, the royalties.
There is a part of me that wants to put out that wants to do a reboot, and it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. Honestly, the only reason I haven't done a reboot is because that's why all the stuff is still there, is because I might one day come back out with a different tone and a different message. But the reason it hasn't happened yet is because I've been enjoying the other show that I'm working on, and I've been busy in life, and I've had a much happier life when I'm not constantly battling people, deities specifically, that I've already accepted don't exist.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you're trying to get maybe some friends and family to listen to the show. Were you able to have any constructive conversations based on that?
I can't think of anything positive, honestly. Yeah, it was. I did get a lot of really good feedback, and I really do appreciate everyone that did that. I mean, there were people from. There's a guy from. I'm gonna fuck this up and sound like an asshole. I'm gonna go with Scotland. Probably not Scotland. Somewhere out there that wrote out to me one day. There was a really nice guy that picked me up from your show that talked to me a bunch over the 25 episodes, and. But yeah, when it comes to those people that I even had one episode that was really tailored to a friend of mine because of some stuff he and I had been talking about. And yeah, it was when he listened to it, he thought that it was one of those things where you go in really proud, like, hey, check out this thing I did. Check out this thing I made. What do you think? And they're like, and it sucked. That was the general response. Well, and he didn't say that specifically, but he did say that it was, it seemed very mocking and disrespectful of essentially him and the other people that were involved in that. And I was like, man, that was the exact opposite thing of what I meant to do. And I'm starting to accept the fact that there are certain, and I think because I am where I am with religion, I don't understand this natively, but I think there are certain boundaries that you just can't cross. You can cross it with every other dicey issue you want to throw out there. You can make fun and you can mock it and you can really just throw it through the ringer, and that's comedy. But then you start to say certain things about Yahweh, and even if it's from the same spirit and very parallel in terms of tone, it really rubs people the wrong way. And I guess that makes sense, and it's something that I can accept as part of living with theists. There's going to be a line with religion in particular that you have to keep your pillow hands on.
Well, I also think it just has to do with privilege. I'll mention a story that Dustin Dark in the live chat will appreciate. The whole Wonder Woman screening that was just women, and how many dudes just freaked out over it. And anytime, I mean, the stories about how Christians have been persecuted keep coming out, and I feel like the story of Christianity being persecuted has existed since Christianity has existed. I don't know how they're able to keep it going, but it makes it different. Like a Christian can attack an atheist and not feel like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. But if you attack a religious person, you do stop. The idea between attacking ideas and attacking people. People really don't know the difference at this point. So Sure. It comes off that way, and I bet it's really hard to get that idea across to somebody else, to go, hey, by the way, if you reacted that way, if I reacted this way to you about something you said about atheism, you probably would have been like, what's the big deal? You're just going to hell. So what's the problem? What's the problem?
Well, I think there's something involved in skepticism there, to where, to throw a shout out here to Bobby C at the No Religion Required podcast. He always says he operates under the platinum rule, which is a step above the golden rule. If I'm going to treat others like I want to be treated, I want people to crush my bad ideas. I want people to let me know when I'm thinking of something dumb. I mean, and I think if you're a skeptic, I think that's how you view the world. You don't want to be having bad ideas, and it might sting sometimes, but it's still something that in the long run you appreciate, having bad ideas replaced by better ideas. And I think that if I'm going to operate under the platinum rule, treat others as they wish to be treated, not how you wish to be treated. I'm not sure I can say a non-skeptic wants to have their ideas crushed. Doesn't mean I can't talk to them about things, but I think that, I think that the fact that I want people to come at me swinging when it comes to what I believe, I don't think other people feel that way, and I think I have to respect that. I think it's appropriate to respect that, especially when you're talking to friends.
Yeah, something to be said. Susie from Barroom Atheist had the whole "don't kick my puppy" thing when she was still a believer, and Bill wasn't like, "Hey, don't come too hard at that belief." But apparently it worked out. So you sure that you didn't give up your show just because you were tired of talking to yourself?
If I had formed some dialogue with theists, even if it was just through email, that probably would have given me something to go on a little bit longer. But I mean, I was going to Answers in Genesis, Zach. I was going to Answers in Genesis to look for conflict. That's the definition of punching down. That's like that's pretty low. So I mean, if I had some real people, some real conversations with theists in particular, to continue a dialogue in a meaningful way, it probably would have gone a little bit longer. But in the end, if I do a reboot, it would be something like that, I think, because and talking with people is not only more meaningful, I think, but it's more entertainment value too. You have different perspective, and you have playoff, and that's so much more valuable than just essentially an audiobook that's never been published, which is basically what I was doing.
Well, if you ever do want to talk to a theist, I know a pastor in Chicago who's a big fan of beer, who might be your guy. I interviewed
Absolutely.
for the second time recently. Although, I don't know, it is tough because you talk to a theist, you kind of expect there's going to be a debate. But if you listen to enough Christian atheist debates, you realize they're just yelling at each other, and there's no, like, when you're finally seeing people have a conversation and kind of thinking and their brains are maybe changing a little bit, that's when it's interesting. And it just doesn't happen very often.
I agree.
I feel like
totally
a lot of people are sold on keeping their persona going. So it's tough to do, and it's tough to be vulnerable, which shouldn't be at this point. We need more of that.
And when you see the people that are, you can tell that they have debate in their blood. When you see those people debate each other, to me it gets annoying because you can tell that they're both, and this isn't like, I used to think this was a theistic trick, but it's not. It's a debate trick where they start avoiding questions and trying not to play into the hand of the person who they're talking with. And I've seen everybody, even the people that I respect the most on the atheistic side, do this. And I always want to say, come on, man, just answer the question. And I feel like a useful form of conversation would be a non-debate dialogue. And you're right, that doesn't happen too often because the people that are putting it out there do have, essentially, they have their own goals and their own shows to keep up. So maybe what I need to do is I need to find some theistic podcasts and then put myself out there after me. What do you think? Think that would do the trick?
It could. I know I've heard of a few atheists who show up at churches and kind of talk to them and get questions, and that could help. Yeah, it's almost beyond the, hey, what do you think? It's like, why do you think that? And maybe you can get somewhere, but it's a bit of an effort, and I don't think a lot of people want to make that kind of effort. It's tough. You feel your brain working, and you're like, no, I don't like this brain working thing. It's not good. But right. I'm worried, and I haven't done a quote in a while, and some of the questions have already been answered, but I'm going to throw this one out there. Considering Yahweh, dude ain't there, where will you vent now?
The fact that I could let the show go is essentially proof that need. I still experience the need to create, and I still experience the need to reach out to people and have meaningful conversations. And I can do that in other ways, but the venting, I've kind of let it go. And that's part of what I realized over the past couple of years that I've been doing it. And, well, a couple of years ago it started. I haven't been doing it for most of that period, but I kind of learned that there really isn't anything wrong with being in the minority of thought, especially when it comes to religion, and that it's not. And this is a tricky one, but even if there's 10 people that disagree with you when it comes to religion, or if there's 100, or if there's 1,000, or if there's 1,000,000, none of that actually affects the validity of those religious claims. More, I realized, if anyone actually is right in the world when it comes to religion, they are in the minority. Because if you look at the biggest world religion, which according to something I looked at recently that was Christianity, they were only at like 33%, which means and even if you accept that they're all the same type of thought, which I would never claim that, but even if you accepted that, that means the vast majority of the world is wrong. And so if anyone does have it right, whoever he or she is, they have to be the minority of thought on a global scale. And that's a little bit comforting to know that just because in my state, in the place that I live, I feel like I'm in the minority, that doesn't actually mean that much.
Yeah, there are times where I have the disturbing thought, like, what if the Christian extremist and Islamic extremist realized they were kind of fighting the same battle and decided to work together to kill all us atheists? Man, I'm glad they'll never agree with each other, and they don't agree with each other. Even the Christian extremists and Islamic extremists just can't get along, which pretty much makes it straightforward. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
That sounds like a Netflix special. You should push that.
Yeah. Oh boy.
I would totally
want to talk. Wait a second. We're saying the same stuff. It's just And there's so much in common. Like the Christians took a minor league, like Jewish god, and made into a major leaguer, and then Muhammad made a minor league god at his time into a major leaguer. But they both had to use the Jewish folklore to legitimize it while simultaneously trying to kill them all.
Right.
Which, that's just no way to say thank you. For someone like. That'd be like me saying, "Thanks, Noah, Heath, and Eli, for doing your show. Now I must kill you." They probably wouldn't be too happy with this.
I can promise you that when I say thank you for having me on your show twice now, I will not in any way attempt to take your life. That will be basically at the very bottom of the list of ways I will show my thanks. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that there's a list somewhere. Nope, it's a longer list than I'm imagining. Okay, so we're going to do live read 2, and then we're going to continue with the final quote that I have. Oh, it's so sad. So sad to hear quotes go. So when you're sympathetic to a person who's living a life that you cannot completely grasp, you listen to them and listen good when they grieve. So in this week's inciting incident, Marissa talks about the year anniversary of the Pulse shooting. How would I feel if 50 atheists were shot at a club? First of all, 50 atheists gathering together is statistically impossible. Reason Kong was a lie. Alex Jones told me I'd be devastated and destroyed and less a fan of humanity. So please check this show out. So the quote I have is, "You can prove bacteria, but you can't prove Jesus."
That is true. That is a fact.
Final episode, you were talking because you had been reading Answers in Genesis. You did it so we didn't have to. So if, as the claim was, that evolution is a religion, wouldn't that make religious people respect it more?
I don't care. And the reason I don't care if they respect it or not is because religion doesn't deserve to be on the same playing field as anything that has any kind of evidence, whether it's I'm even willing to accept theoretical evidence at some point when it comes to religion. But when you have something that actually has empirical evidence behind it, out of religion, I'm not even sure if that's as much an attempt to bring down evolution as it is an attempt to elevate theism. And so, yeah, I'm not going to happen. Not okay.
What just strikes me as interesting that religious people always kind of try to take atheism down by making it into a religion, when it's like, but then, yeah, you're either taking us down or you're trying to move yourself up, which in either way doesn't make your side look good.
Yeah, enjoy your new iPhone 7 or iPhone 8, which will be a rock and a twig, banging the twig on the rock, praying for it to start dialing people. Yeah, that's how good things happen. Science. Yeah, let's not lose that.
You're using the internet to create your website to show how great Answers in Genesis is. All it's so bad. It's so bad. So you sure you didn't just quit your show because you wanted to play more video games?
No, I did actually. I played No Man's Sky.
You tell the truth, man.
That was a good game. And so if you ever bump into Planet Titties, that one is mine. It's a good planet. Lots of interesting items on that planet. Yeah. But no, I actually, you know what? I don't play video games either, and I think this is a sign of me kind of getting older. And maybe that doesn't mean something to someone who's not a gamer, but I put, understand that I put hundreds and hundreds of hours into Final Fantasy 6 and 10, and most recently The Witcher 3. I put hundreds of hours into that. Being somebody who has always been really into RPGs and open world games, and then I have found a lot more joy coming from creating things. And there is an extent to where once you accept that you are going to die and obliviate. Is that a verb? Obliviate?
It is now.
Yeah, you're going to obliviate. Once you accept that you're going to obliviate, then it kind of makes you want to kind of cut back on the Candy Crush and kind of dial in on some other things that might be meaningful to your kids and to your friends and to other people in your community should you ever have an untimely death or even a timely one. So yeah, video games are great. Creating things are better. Podcasting is fantastic. That's my vote.
Well, you had, I made a comment when we first talked that you actually sent me an email and I didn't see it because I created an email address for this show, but I didn't check it very often because I didn't get very much. I had this random like Christian guy kind of spam coming to me, and there's not much besides that. So you actually created an email address for your show asking people to make their case to save your soul or believe in Jesus. So did you get any of that feedback?
I did not. I did get many very kind, non-theistic people, whether they were atheists or agnostics or just people who enjoyed the show, whatever they were, and didn't have theistic boxing gloves on. I got very nice comments from a lot of people, and I really appreciate all those people that did that. And I don't know. What do you think? Was it silly for me to think, hey, Yahweh, if you're out there, bro, I literally created an email address for your people to reach out to me right now, and I'm checking it. Go, you man, do it. And then nothing happened. And of course, I wouldn't expect it to. But I don't know. Zero theistic comments. I did get some interesting give and take with my dad, who was a minister. Over the past couple of years, not show related because he never listened to it, but it was a lot of the things that my dad and I talked about typically involved the same comments you'll hear on the atheist experience, and not from the apologists, but from the people who were genuine. So it wasn't anything new. It wasn't anything revolutionary. It always does mean a little bit more when it's coming from somebody you care about. But it ultimately wasn't enough to change my mind.
So is your dad still a minister? And what was it, the liberal Methodist that you grew up as?
Correct. Good memory. He retired, so he is no longer an acting minister, but he does do things here and there. Very liberal Methodist church. I like to think that a lot of us that were there, especially a lot of my peers that were there, didn't actually take the things we were saying seriously. And it's one of those things where you chip away at it enough, and it's distilled down to something that is meaningless. And liberal Christianity in general is not far from that. Like if you accept that there is no hell, which a bunch of us did when we were kids, if you accept that there is no hell, and then you accept that condemn people, then it becomes this weird, why is there a heaven? And what's the point of this life? If there is no hell, then why are you doing a trial run? What's the point? I don't know. There is some truth to the fact that once you take away a lot of the literal aspects of Christianity, then the whole thing kind of dissolves, which is why I think a lot of people are so strict about the literal interpretation of the Bible, because it can start to fall apart if you're not careful. It did for me.
It could start to fall apart just all the time. But how's the relationship? I try to think of how things are between me and my parents. Like, I told my mom I was an atheist, and I assumed she passed the word to my dad. And then when I was at an atheist conference in Nashville, I told them about the show and got kind of crickets. So how has that relationship continued? You still apparently talk. You haven't been banned, right?
I asked my dad once, I said, hey, if you knew that I was an atheist podcaster, would you want to know about it? Would you want to hear the show? And he thought about it and said, I don't know. And I said, okay, I get it. And so I never sent him the link. I never explained to him how to find it. And you're not going to, because even back then it wasn't a big show, so it wasn't easy to find. But you definitely won't now. My relationship with my folks is, and with everyone in my life, is pretty good. And I think the reason that my relationship is as good as it is with people is that and this is kind of an anti, from what I understand, an anti-David Silverman type of thought, but I think it's necessary to label yourself. And I don't think I'm going to do that too much anymore. And the reason I don't think I'm going to label myself an atheist or a Democrat or whatever else you might want to label yourself is because I don't believe that anybody can come into a conversation with somebody knowing a label like that and not have a predisposition towards you. Now, one of the things that's changed since I quit doing the show is I'm a lot more honest in my life about my thoughts. So if somebody says to me, I'm praying for you, if something bad goes in my life, I say, does that actually work? Like, when you pray for things, does it happen? Because I tell you, man, I have never once prayed for something and felt like it got answered. So I have been more confrontational but in a pleasant, friendly way. But I do refuse to wear labels nowadays. I think Dave Silverman said something along the lines of, if you have the ability to call yourself an atheist, you should, because you have that privilege and you need to pave the way for everyone else. But I think I only agree with that if your goal is to levitate the word atheism. If your goal is to spread ideas and to change the way people think, I think the label can actually be counterproductive. So I don't call myself an atheist to my parents anymore. I have before. But when I'm talking to my parents, I don't hold back the punches. I ask them the questions that I have, and I want to see what they think. And we have these meaningful conversations, and I think they are more receptive to it now. I would imagine they assume that I'm some kind of agnostic Lutheran or whatever. But I think they're more receptive to those conversations now than they ever have been since I've stopped wearing that label. I think it's something I'm going to continue to do because I think there is a distinct tactical advantage in doing so.
It does seem at this point, whatever label that you accept, people are going to think whatever negative stuff exists about that label. So that is true, although there have to be some people who just say, screw it, the David Silvermans. I think it's okay. We don't have to all be the same. It's like we can have the David Silverman in your face types, and then we have the types who are like, this is what I am, but I'm not going to use that label because it's not. You're right. It's going to be taken as negative, and with a lot of people, you're just not going to get anywhere with it.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Right.
I mean, if people tell me they're Christian, then I have like 20 more questions because you don't really know anything about them. To be honest, you get started.
Right.
But I don't know. Labels are awesome, especially on soup.
Well, I even refuse to call myself a Democrat anymore. And the reason I refuse to call myself a Democrat
that's true.
Because this is something interesting I learned. I don't know how it is in your area. I mean, I grew up in South Carolina. So when I grew up in South Carolina, the only issues that anybody cared about were social issues. And so for the most part, the Republicans that I met in the South were assholes because they didn't care about economics or welfare. They didn't want gay people to get married. They didn't want, that was their agenda. Their agenda was anti-social progress, which means they were assholes. Like there's really no other way to say it. And then I moved up here, and a lot of the Republicans up here that I've met are really concerned with economics. And I can't even always say that they're wrong when it comes to economic claims. But if I say that I'm a Democrat, all that means to these people is that I want everyone to stop working and be on welfare, or that I want Hillary Clinton to start raping children, or whatever that bullshit Pizzagate thing was. So it's like, I can tell people that I voted for Hillary Clinton, and then we can have a conversation, because that is what happened. I voted for Hillary Clinton this past election, and I don't hide that fact, and I'll have that conversation with people. But if I say that I'm a Democrat, that conversation doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen in a meaningful way. And that's just another one of those things that made me realize that until everybody has the same definition for what an atheist is, or for what a Democrat is, or for what a Republican is, or for what an agnostic is, all of those things are completely pointless when you're talking to people. All that I'm going to present when I talk to people nowadays is going to be the ideas, and I'm not going to hold back my punches. But the fact that I'm not coming into it saying, this is what I am, tends to make the reception a little bit more reasonable.
Are we allowed to be reasonable? That is true. Yeah, I mean, definitely after this last election, like, I don't think the Democratic Party is necessarily that much better off if Hillary wins presidency. The Republican Party seems to be the dead that doesn't realize it's dead yet, but it doesn't mean the Democrats are doing any better because they're not winning any damn elections. We'll see. I'm in Georgia, and we have a guy who's a shot of winning, but we'll see. That'll happen next week. And it's only one spot in the House of Representatives, which I don't think makes that much of a difference. But let's talk a little bit personally. So how are things with the family, with your wife and the kids and all that?
I can't speak for them, but I know that I've never been happier. I now have the strength of mind and the strength of character to, if I don't want to go to church, if I don't want to do a position of something that I think is silly, I can say, I don't want to do that today, and it'll be fine. And I think that's great. Now I do sometimes still want to do those things because there is a part of me that, and this is interesting too. Like, I remember a time when I was hurt on a soccer field, and a guy from Palestine came up to me and patted me on the back when I was hurting and said he was going to pray to Allah that I was going to feel better. And I remember thinking, that's weird, but whatever. And then I remember a different time where somebody said they were going to pray for me to Yahweh, to God, capital G, God. And I got mad. I got really mad. I was like, save your prayers. There are a lot of people who need a lot more than me. I'll find my own damn car keys or whatever it was at the time. I don't have real people problems. So, and then I had to reflect upon that and realize that, okay, some built up hostility towards Christianity that doesn't exist towards Islam. That's interesting. But that has largely faded to where I can still do things with my family and go to church with my family or hear my daughter say a prayer at dinner, and none of that bothers me anymore. And a lot of it just comes down to, I know how I feel about it. I know exactly how I feel about all these things. I've thought it through for years. I have a very good reason for why I feel these things. So I'm no longer, I don't have that same cognitive distance that I used to, which means that I'm happier than I've ever been. My existence within my family unit is better than it's ever been. And a lot of that just comes to me. I think it comes from knowing how I feel about things, hashing it out with myself, and dropping those isms and those ists that I used to self-affix for some reason.
Well, what actually happened? What was the verdict on? There was discussion on your show about your daughter going to a Christian school and there being a discount if you were a member of a church. Do you consider yourself the member of a church? And
no.
What happened there?
No, and she's currently not going to go to Christian school, and it's not because of anything to do with religion, but just because my family as a whole thinks the public school system at this point in time is a better choice for us. So that all panned out. And the thing that I love about my daughter so much is, I got to tell you a quick little story, a proud dad story here. There was a point where I was setting the ADT alarm. I was setting my pin. It started beeping. We walked out the door, and my daughter said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Oh, geez, how do I explain home intrusion to a little kid? This is not good. What do I do?" And then I realized, little bears and Goldilocks. When the three little bears left, Goldilocks came into their house and ate all their food and slept in their beds. And I'm just trying to prevent that from happening. I don't want anybody to come in and eat your food and sleep in your bed. And she said to me, "Daddy, Goldilocks doesn't exist in this world. And I remember thinking right then, I was like, you know what? You're going to be just fine. You're going to have no problems in life. You understand. You get it. So.
Excellent. Yeah, it's something I haven't experienced not having kids, but it does seem at a certain point you kind of have to let go and go, all right, they're going to go their way. You can't force them to be a certain way. I mean, you can try.
I think the best thing you can do is teach skepticism. And I think this is true for everybody, but in specifically, if you are someone who is secular, non-religious, atheistic, whatever you want to wear. And I do think that a lot of kids' grooming comes more from friends than from parents, especially in the later years. But the best thing you can do from start to finish is just teach your kids to be skeptical. And it's not only is it good for them, but it's fun. It is fun to hear a little kid call BS on Santa when they're way too young to even understand why it's BS. It's loads of fun. So, yeah, and I think that's kind of been what's been happening. And it wasn't even intentional. It was just, if you hold the values of education and science, which my whole family does, not just me, but everybody does, then I think it's only a matter of time before skepticism sets in. And I think, I think my kids are going to be awesome.
Sounds good. Now, I did have one last question, but before that, is there anything you want to put out there? This is the exit interview, so you get to say your piece right here.
So I already mentioned how just because you're in the minority, it doesn't mean you are actually wrong. In fact, the minority has to be right. So, and I mentioned how labels can be a bad thing. And in my opinion, you shouldn't wear a label if you don't have to, but that's always should be your choice. But one of the things I wanted to say was, I've said many times on my show and tonight that I felt defective. And I really did. It wasn't just me saying that. I felt defective when it came to religion. The goggles that I viewed the world in were completely supernatural forces, and everyone around me felt the presence of things like even beyond Yahweh, the presence of things like ghosts, spirits. And I almost felt like there was a part of my brain that got snipped or something. And what I wanted to say about that was, this is something that I heard from the atheist experience too. Matt Dillahunty once said along the lines of, he doesn't know what it would take for him to believe in a God, but if there was a God, as was being proposed, that God would know and was choosing not to tell him that he existed. He was choosing not to present that evidence that would in fact convince Matt Dillahunty that there was a God. And when I think about that, and think about it in terms of feeling defective, I was a teacher for a few years, and I do want to say that if you're a good teacher, you can look out and see a student that doesn't understand what's going on. And especially if it's a one-on-one setting, you can say, okay, the message that I've been giving this kid hasn't been working. I'm going to change the way I'm doing this and see if that works. And you can keep doing that. And eventually little Jimmy's going to be able to do calculus. I did it. It works. And that works for everybody. So if you are in a position where I was for whatever reason, and you felt like you were defective, because I honestly did, I just want to say don't, because the burden of that knowledge transfer, the burden of that learning is not upon the student ever. And if you're a human being and you're talking about theology, you are the student. And if there is a God that knows exactly how to make you believe in that God, puts a giant penalty upon you for not believing in that God, but chooses not to give you exactly what it knows you needs, that makes that God a bad teacher and a bad deity. And above all else, just because you feel that way, you are not defective.
Bad deity. Go to timeout.
Where's the spray bottle?
Preferably until the end of time.
There you go.
Now, as the end of the show reaches us, usually I'd be like, hey, pimp your show. Well, there is no show, but there is a show. what is the other podcast that you do and reason why you still have a microphone? And reason why you
So to be honest with
got a microphone?
The only reason that this is the avatar of Sai Lost, which by the way is actually me. So maybe you can be super crafty with Photoshop and unfilter my little image there and figure out who I am. But the only reason that I keep that up is because I have respect for my two co-hosts of the 1068 Pubcast. And there are work-related reasons where they need to not have their names out there. So I keep my identity secret for them as well. And there is a link through Facebook from that show to this show. But yeah, I am doing a show actively with a couple of the co-hosts. We have great dialogue. We talk about very silly, stupid things. And it's called the 1068 Pubcast. And it has absolutely nothing to do with atheism. It was honestly a promise that I made to them. Like, this is, guys, no, really, not going to do it. So if it's something that you'd like to listen to, please check us out and reach out to us. We're always up for talking to people. And of course, I'm going to extend the invite, Zach. If you ever want to come on the show and talk about some silliness, drink some craft beer, you are welcome, as always.
But when would I ever do that? Oh wait, every week. Yeah, that sounds like a good call right there.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Let me scroll through the 55 questions I didn't ask. How did I have so many questions? Okay, well, if you want to support this show, because I finally killed off Sai Lost, which means all of his listeners can come right over to me. Now, I have a Patreon on this show that I'm actually going to see this weekend. Hugh-Man, you may have know, he was at ReasonCon. I feel like I've seen him at conferences more than in real life, and it turned out that he's a fan of this new Atlanta United FC, which is what every soccer team is called, apparently. So there's a soccer team in Atlanta, and you're like, okay, soccer, whatever. But there's a tailgate like 4 hours before the game, and all the beer you can drink, although, of course, I had looked it up, and it's not beer I like. But they said I can bring my own beer, which is totally cool. So we're going to hang out this weekend and watch some soccer after a few beers. So if you want to support this show, Bobby C, Hugh, Teody, Marissa, support this show on Patreon, patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege. And if you can spell it after a 13% beer, anyone can. So you can follow me on Twitter at Zachrilege, like the Zachrilege cast page on Facebook. Send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail. I haven't gotten a hate mail from you yet, Jeannie. What's the deal? So thanks to Sai, if that's your real name, for being on tonight again and sharing the story. So for those of you who are listening, any lost members of that show can come on over here. Stay safe. If you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you are not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get some of that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. I love all y'all. Good night. Gong sound.